My name is Samuel, and in the year 1851 I carried 3 secrets under the roses of Rosehaven. 3 children, 3 lives that called me uncle when my whole soul answered father. By day I was a slave with quiet hands and lowered eyes. By night I was the shadow who met the richest heiress in Virginia, where the moon touched the white roses like spilled milk. Catherine's fingers smelled of crushed petals and ink. Mine smelled of iron and sweat. In that garden, we traded whispers for vows, fear for a brief taste of heaven. But roses have thorns, and every thorn drew a drop of blood. The law said my touch was a crime. The church said our love was sin. Her father said her womb belonged to his plans, not to her heart. So we hid. Letters tucked in hymnals, footsteps counted between the hedge and the fountain. A lullaby hummed soft enough to pass as wind. I watched my sons and daughter grow behind a lie I built to keep them breathing. I taught them to read with stories where the hero wore chains and still found a key. Each night I asked the same prayer. Let the garden hide us one more day. If you believe these buried stories matter, subscribe and comment your state below so I know where you're listening from. Tell me, when love breaks the law, who must bleed first, the chained, the heiress, or the truth itself? The year was 1851, and Rosehaven stood like a palace carved into Virginia's red earth. White columns rose 3 stories high. Windows glittered like watchful eyes. The tobacco fields stretched forever, each leaf a dollar bill growing under the sun. Each worker a shadow chained to that wealth. Inside that house lived Catherine Whitmore, only daughter of Colonel Marcus Whitmore, the most powerful planter in the county. To neighbors, she was the prize jewel of Virginia, a young heiress with hair like gold, eyes like summer sky, and a dowry bigger than most men's fortunes. Every suitor saw her as a path to power. Every whisper at church carried her name like a crown. But Catherine lived in a cage too fine to see. Her father ruled her future. Her evenings were filled with stiff dinners beside senators, judges, and merchants, men who spoke of her as property in finer language than they used for their land or slaves. At 27, she was already called late to marry. Her body and fortune weighed as if they were cattle stock. And me? My name is Samuel. I was not born to Rosehaven. I was bought into it. From North Carolina, I was sold across the border, chosen not for muscle, but for my mind. I could read, I could write, and my previous master had trained me to handle letters and accounts. The colonel purchased me not to till fields, but to serve Catherine herself, her personal attendant, her shadow, her slave. It was a strange role, one that placed me closer to her than even her friends. I fetched her books, prepared her ink, copied her letters, followed her in silence down hallways heavy with imported rugs. I knew the sound of her sighs better than my own breath. I was expected to be invisible, but always near enough to catch her fall if she tripped. The laws of Virginia were clear. Any white woman caught in a union with a black man would be destroyed by scandal, and the black man would be destroyed by rope or bullet. That knowledge sat in my bones each day like a weight. Yet the irony was not lost on me. In this land of freedom, Catherine was shackled by silks and suitors just as surely as I was shackled by chains and law. She was trapped by duty to her family's name. I was trapped by my skin. Every evening after dinner, Catherine walked in the gardens. The roses had been planted by the same hand that designed Monticello, their thorns wrapped around marble fountains like veins. Those walks were her escape from the suffocating walls of Rosehaven, and because I was her shadow, they became my escape too. Neither of us knew then that those evening walks would undo everything Rosehaven stood for. Neither of us knew that behind the roses, the fate of a dynasty would begin to crack. 1851 Virginia, Rosehaven. 1 heiress, 1 slave, 1 cage of gold and iron. A forbidden seed is about to take root. If you lived in that house, would you notice the cage or only the roses? The first time I walked with Catherine through Rosehaven's garden, I thought little of it. I was only doing my duty, keeping a step behind, silent, eyes lowered. The moon caught her hair like spun gold, and the roses bent in the night wind as if bowing to her. My role was to be unseen, a shadow carrying her shawl, a servant ready to answer but never to speak. At first, that is all it was. She strolled the gravel paths and I followed. She paused at the fountain, and I stood a few paces back. She whispered prayers at the marble angel, and I listened without sound. The garden was her escape, not mine, but silence has a way of breaking. One evening, as cicadas sang and the air smelled of jasmine, she asked me, "Do you know the names of these roses, Samuel?" I froze. Slaves were not asked questions like that. Still, I answered carefully, "The red are damask, the white are Cherokee, the yellow I do not know." She smiled, faint but real. "I did not know either. My mother planted them. She died when I was 12. You're the first person I've told that in years." From that night, the garden changed. What began as small questions about flowers or weather grew into longer talks. She asked me about my childhood, my family. I told her of my mother, sold when I was 10, and my father, who died trying to escape chains. I had never spoken those words to a white person before. Her eyes grew wet. "Your chains are iron, Samuel. Mine are gold, but they cut just as deep." She spoke of the suitors her father paraded before her, men who never saw her as a person, but as a prize. She confessed that sometimes she felt more prisoner than heiress. She whispered that her father cared more for tobacco fields than her heart. I began to see the loneliness in her eyes when she smiled at guests, the way her laughter sounded hollow at dinners. She too was trapped in Rosehaven, though her prison was draped in silks. The garden became our sanctuary, the one place where our words could breathe without walls listening. We sat on stone benches, the roses shielding us like guards who kept our secret. She asked me one night, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to be free to love whom you chose?" My throat tightened. Such a question could hang me. Yet her eyes begged for honesty. "Every day," I whispered, "I dream of waking and deciding my own life, even if it were just for one day." She turned to me then, really turned, her gaze lingering longer than law allowed. For the first time, she looked not at a servant, but at a man. And in that moment, the garden shifted. It was no longer just roses and fountains. It became a place where chains, gold and iron began to loosen. Rosehaven's roses hid more than fragrance. In their shadows, an heiress and her slave began to speak as equals. Would you dare answer such a question, if the wrong word meant the rope? It happened in September, when the nights grew cooler and the roses held the last fire of summer. The moon was high, silver spilling across the garden, and Catherine walked slower than usual. I carried her shawl as always, a step behind. But I could feel something stirring in the air, heavy and trembling, as if the night itself was holding its breath. We stopped at the stone bench beneath the rose arch. She sat, her hands twisting together, her eyes far away. At last she whispered, "I cannot pretend any more, Samuel." My heart thudded like a drum in my chest. I dared not ask what she meant. But then she rose, turned to me, and her eyes glistened with tears. "All my life, I have done what others demanded, sat where I was told, smiled when I wished to scream. But when I walk with you, I feel alive. Do you understand?" I could barely breathe. "Miss Catherine," I said carefully, "if anyone saw us now, I don't care what they see." Her voice shook, but her hands reached for me anyway. "I know what they call sin. I know what they call crime. But I cannot carry this silence any longer." Before I could answer, her fingers brushed my cheek. And then, in a breath, her lips pressed against mine. For one heartbeat, the world fell away. No law, no rope, no master's whip. Only her warmth. Only the roses bending in the night air. When we pulled apart, fear came crashing back. My blood ran cold. "If your father finds out, they will kill me. They will destroy you." Her jaw set firm. "Then no one must find out. We will hide it, Samuel. I have lived as my father's daughter, but for once I will live as my own woman. I choose you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that love could be stronger than law, that roses could shield us from bullets and chains. Yet even in that first kiss, I knew the price would come. That night I lay awake in my cabin, my lips still burning from her touch. Every sound in the dark was a threat. The rustle of leaves, the creak of floorboards, the echo of footsteps that could mean discovery. But nothing, not even fear, could erase the truth now. We had crossed the line. Catherine Whitmore, the untouchable heiress of Rosehaven, had kissed her slave beneath the roses, and the garden would never forget. One September night, the roses of Rosehaven witnessed a kiss that broke every law in Virginia. If love itself were outlawed, Would you still reach for it in the dark? The kiss was only the beginning. What followed was a secret life stitched together with silence, whispers, and trembling hope. For 8 years, we played our parts before the world, mistress and servant, while in the shadows we became something else entirely. Lovers, partners, parents. Our first child was born in the winter of 1845, a boy with light skin but eyes that mirrored mine. We named him Thomas in our hearts, though to the world he was an orphan Catherine had graciously rescued. She told neighbors his parents had died of fever, leaving him alone and unwanted. The ladies of Richmond praised her Christian charity. The colonel accepted her story, proud that his daughter showed such compassion. No one looked deeper. 2 years later came Mary, our daughter, with golden curls but features that betrayed a darker bloodline. Again, Catherine invented a story. Another poor orphan. Another soul saved by her generosity. Neighbors shook their heads in admiration. How noble, how saintly, they said. None guessed that the heiress's womb, not her heart, had given these children life. By 1849, our youngest son, James, arrived. 3 children, all mine, all hidden in plain sight beneath Rosehaven's roof. To the world, I was only Uncle Samuel, the loyal servant helping Catherine raise her orphans. To my own children, I was the shadow who taught them letters by candlelight, who told them stories of heroes in chains. But in truth, my heart broke every day. I could never hold them openly as father. I could never claim their blood without risking their lives. When Thomas asked me once, "Uncle Samuel, why do I look different from Mama Catherine?" I nearly choked on the lie I fed him. Catherine carried the weight in her body and in her soul. Each birth wore her down, not only in strength but in spirit. She was praised by neighbors for her kindness, but behind every compliment was a blade of fear. At night she whispered, "How long can we keep this secret, Samuel? How long before someone sees what we see?" Already whispers moved through the county. Strange how those children resemble that clever slave. Odd how their eyes seem to follow him like blood recognizes blood. Each comment struck me like a whip, reminding me how thin our deception truly was. And still, in the hidden garden, among the roses that had shielded our first kiss, we clung to each other. Catherine would take my hand and whisper, "They are worth it, Samuel. Every lie, every risk. They are our children." But the truth was a shadow that grew longer each year, a shadow that could no longer be hidden by roses or stories. 3 children born in shadows, 3 lies told to save them. At Rosehaven, whispers grow louder, and danger sharpens its teeth. Could you watch your own child call you uncle, knowing the truth might kill them? By the spring of 1850, the children's laughter filled the halls of Rosehaven, but so did the whispers. At church socials, I caught neighbors studying Thomas too long. Some tilted their heads when Mary smiled, as though her features stirred a memory they couldn't place. "Uncanny resemblance," they muttered, though they never finished the thought. One afternoon, Mrs. Henderson from the next plantation leaned close to Catherine, her fan fluttering against her lips. "My, your Thomas has grown tall. Why, he almost favors that clever servant of yours." She laughed as if it were a joke, but her eyes lingered on me with sharp suspicion. Catherine's smile never broke. "You flatter my Samuel," she said smoothly, as if brushing off an idle remark. But that night, her hands trembled when she poured water at the fountain. "They're starting to see it, Samuel. Every day it gets harder to pretend." The colonel, meanwhile, had his own suspicions, though of a different kind. He grew restless with Catherine's stubborn refusal to marry. At dinner, he thundered, "You're 27, Catherine." A woman passed her bloom. "Do you mean to waste your life on orphans and charity while our family name fades?" She lowered her eyes, answering softly, "I have no wish to marry yet, Father. My duty lies here with the children." His reply was cold steel. "Children you didn't birth. Don't forget yourself. Rosehaven needs heirs of blood, not strays at your table." I stood by the doorway, my face expressionless, but inside my heart raged. Those were my heirs, my blood, hidden behind lies to keep them alive. The colonel's brother, James Whitmore, began to visit more often. He was a man with eyes like hawks, narrow, probing, never missing a detail. I caught him watching me when I helped the children with their letters. I heard him murmur to the colonel, "Strange how familiar that slave seems with your daughter." and her little wards. Doesn't sit right with me. The colonel waved him off, but I saw doubt flicker across his face. Even a father blinded by pride could not ignore the whispers forever. For Catherine and me, every day became a performance. She smiled wider at neighbors, spoke louder of her charity, and filled her home with the talk of orphans and Christian duty. I bent my back lower, played the obedient servant more perfectly, forced myself to step further back in public, even as my heart screamed to draw near my children. But behind closed doors, the tension strangled us. Catherine whispered in the garden, "They're circling us, Samuel, like wolves scenting blood. How much longer before they tear us apart?" I had no answer. Only the silence of a man who knew the truth was a noose tightening around all our necks. By 1850, Rosehaven's roses could no longer hide the truth. Neighbors whispered, family watched, and suspicion grew sharper every day. Would you keep lying to protect your children, or confess even if it meant death? The breaking point came one hot summer evening, when thunder rolled over the fields and the colonel's voice struck like lightning at the dinner table. "You will meet Senator Caldwell's boy next month," he declared, his cane striking the floor for emphasis. "A fine young lawyer. From Richmond, well-bred, well-connected. He will make a suitable husband for you, Catherine, and strengthen our family ties." The words dropped heavy as chains. Catherine's fork froze above her plate, her face pale but composed. "Father, I am not ready for marriage." "Not ready?" His laugh was bitter. "At your age, most women are grandmothers. You waste your bloom on playing nursemaid to orphans while your duty rots. You will marry, and that is final." The air in the room burned. I stood by the door, every muscle clenched. To him I was invisible, a servant holding a tray, but to me those words meant death. Marriage would drag Catherine to Richmond, tear her from the children, and leave me powerless, sold off or whipped for any hint of disobedience. That night, beneath the roses, Catherine wept against my chest. "If I am forced to marry him, Samuel, I lose everything. You, the children, the life we've fought to protect." I held her, my voice low but urgent. "Then we cannot stay. We must flee." She stiffened, eyes wide in the moonlight.
"Flee to where?"
"The North, Canada." "Yes." My whisper was fire and fear in equal measure. "I've heard of places where we could live as man and wife, where our children would not need lies to breathe. Canada. The Underground Railroad runs north through Richmond, Philadelphia. There are safe houses, people who help. We can go." Her tears fell faster. "But my inheritance, my name, Rosehaven, everything I've ever known. To leave it all behind?" "Catherine," I said, lifting her chin, "I am already a fugitive. Every breath I take beside you is a crime. The only difference is whether we choose the day they hang me, or the day we walk free." Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. For the first time, escape was not just a dream whispered in fear. It was a plan whispered in defiance. From that night, our conversations shifted. We no longer spoke of roses or moonlight. We spoke of roots, of gold hidden in lockets, of the children's questions we could not yet answer. But Rosehaven was a house with many eyes, and every plan we made under the stars risked being overheard by walls that did not forgive. The colonel's command was clear: marry Caldwell or disgrace the family. But for Catherine and Samuel, marriage meant death. Only escape remained. If freedom meant abandoning your name, your land, and your past, would you take it? The summer heat broke with a storm, and with it Colonel Whitmore's body broke too. A stroke struck him down at his desk, leaving half his body twisted and his speech slurred. The man who had once ruled Rosehaven like a general was carried to his bed, dependent on others for the smallest task. For a moment, Catherine thought the storm might give us mercy. A sickbed could distract him, soften his tyranny, weaken his grip on her future. But if anything, it sharpened it. His body faltered, but his eyes grew keener. From his pillows, the colonel became a silent watcher. He noticed details he had once ignored. The way Thomas ran to me with books, how Mary's hand found mine for comfort, how James's eyes seemed to follow me like a mirror. Each glance was a dagger, though he said nothing at first. One evening, as Catherine smoothed his blanket, he murmured through stiff lips, "Strange. How those children of yours all carry a certain look. A look I've seen before, somewhere under this very roof." Her hands froze, but she kept her voice calm. "They are orphans, Father." Nothing more. His eyes narrowed. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you think me blind. Their eyes. Their manner. It's as if blood speaks louder than your lies." I stood in the corner, head bowed, but my heart hammered so hard I feared it would betray me. Days turned into weeks. Uncle James prowled the halls, muttering about impropriety. Neighbors whispered more boldly now, and the Colonel's suspicion grew like a storm cloud that would not move on. One night Catherine came to the garden, her face pale as the moon. "He knows, Samuel," she whispered. "He's piecing it together. I see it in his eyes. Every question, every look. It's only a matter of time before he speaks the truth aloud." I gripped her hands. "Then we must act before he does." But the Colonel, frail as he was, had not yet played his last card. And Rosehaven was no longer just a house. It was a trap, closing tighter with each breath we took. The Colonel's body failed him, but his suspicion did not. From his bed, he began to see through the lies of Rosehaven. If the walls of your own home turned against you, would you run or fight? The day came sooner than I feared. Catherine was away visiting neighbors, the children in the nursery. I was summoned alone to the Colonel's room. "Close the door," he rasped. His voice was thin, but his eyes cut like steel. I obeyed, standing at the foot of his bed, every nerve screaming that this was the end. For a long moment he studied me. His lips twisted not by stroke but by fury. Then he spoke the words that shattered what little shield we had left. I know. The air left my chest. I tried to speak, but he raised a trembling hand. "I know what you and Catherine have done. I know whose blood runs in those children's veins. Did you think me blind, Samuel? Did you think whispers would not reach my ears? 8 years under my own roof, you've mocked my name with your sin." My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to answer. "What will you do, sir?" He leaned forward as far as his crippled body allowed. "What I must. What honor demands, yet..." His eyes softened only slightly. "They are still children. My grandchildren, though born of shame. I will not see them destroyed by scandal or sold like cattle. And Catherine, she is my only daughter. Foolish, reckless, but mine still." I stood silent, waiting for the blow. "You will all disappear," he said at last. "Tonight, a wagon will meet you at the mill road. You'll be carried north under new names. And tomorrow, the world will believe you dead, lost in a carriage fire or drowned in a river. Rosehaven will mourn you, but never see you again." I stared at him, unable to believe. "You would help us escape?" His voice cracked like dry wood. "Do not mistake this for mercy. What you and Catherine have done is an abomination, but better you vanish than stain this family forever. Take her, take the children. But if you ever return, if you ever breathe the Whitmore name again, I will see you hunted and hanged." His hand trembled as he reached for a drawer. From it he pulled a pouch that clinked with gold. He tossed it toward me, and it landed heavy in my palm. "This is all you'll have from me. Use it to vanish. When you leave, you bury Samuel the slave and Catherine the heiress. You will be dead to Virginia. Do you understand?" I bowed my head, though my heart raged. "Yes, sir." As I left his chamber, his final words followed like a curse. "You walk free not by your courage, but by my command." Remember that, the Colonel knew. But instead of rope, he offered exile. Tonight, love must flee or die. If your enemy gave you freedom, but at the price of erasing your name, would you take it? The night was black as pitch, the kind of night where even the moon dared not look upon what we were about to do. Catherine's hands trembled as she packed the last of her jewelry, her eyes darting to the sleeping faces of Thomas, Mary, and James. They stirred when we lifted them, blinking drowsily, unaware that every step was carrying them away from the only home they had ever known. We slipped through the servants' door, hearts pounding like war drums. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a shout of betrayal. The great house of Rosehaven loomed behind us, its white columns glimmering faintly in the starlight. A palace of chains we would never see again. At the mill road, a wagon waited, its driver cloaked and silent. A grizzled man named Josiah, sent by the Colonel himself. He gave no greeting, only a curt nod, as if this was not the first family he had carried into shadow. We climbed aboard, clutching our children close. Catherine sat stiff, her lips pressed tight, her eyes wet. I held her hand beneath the blanket, my other hand gripping the pouch of gold like a lifeline. The wheels creaked, and the wagon rolled into the night. Every sound set my nerves aflame. A snapping twig, was it a patrol? The bark of a dog, was it a hunter? More than once I imagined torches flaring behind us, ropes ready for my neck, chains for Catherine and the children. "Mama, where are we going?" Mary whispered, her small voice carrying too loud in the still air. Catherine bent, kissed her forehead. "On a journey, sweetheart. Somewhere new, somewhere safe. Will Uncle Samuel come too?" Thomas asked sleepily, his eyes heavy. I met Catherine's gaze across the wagon bed, and for the first time she did not falter. "Yes," she said firmly. "He will always be with us." The children dozed again, their innocence shielding them from the terror their parents bore. But Catherine's eyes never left mine. In them I saw fear, yes, but also defiance. We had chosen this. We had chosen each other, even if the price was everything we had left behind. The road stretched endlessly ahead, winding through fields I once worked, past streams where I once drew water, through forests where my ancestors' sweat had soaked the earth. Each mile carried us further from Virginia, further from Rosehaven's roses, further from the life of chains. When I looked back over my shoulder, the lights of the house had faded into darkness. Only memory kept them alive now. That night, the Virginia heiress and her slave lover ceased to exist. In their place rode a fugitive family, nameless in the eyes of the law, but bound together by blood, by love, and by the desperate hope that the world might yet hold a place where they could breathe free. At midnight, Rosehaven lost its heiress and its slave. A wagon carried them into the dark and into legend. If you had to flee in silence, leaving every trace of your past behind, would you look back or only forward? The road north was no straight path. It was a maze of shadows, barns, riverboats, and strangers whose hands might save us, or sell us. Each day we traveled under different names. Each night we lay awake, listening for hoofbeats in the dark. Our first haven was a Quaker woman's house in Richmond. Her name was Rebecca Morrison, and her eyes softened the moment she saw us. She ushered us into her cellar where lantern light flickered on rough walls. "Here," she said firmly. "You'll be safe till morning." Rebecca gave us new names to carry. Catherine became Sarah Johnson, a widow. I was her freed servant, Samuel Johnson, traveling to Canada to help her start again. Our children for the first time were told to call me Papa. Their voices cracked the air like bells when they whispered it. A word forbidden in Virginia became holy in that cellar. From Richmond to Philadelphia, we moved piece by piece. A wagon one day, a river skiff the next. We walked muddy trails, our boots sinking deep, carrying sleeping children in our arms. Twice, innkeepers' questions grew sharp. "Strange company for a white lady, ain't it?" But Catherine's voice, steady as steel, played her role as grieving widow until suspicion passed. Yet danger never slept. At a checkpoint outside Baltimore, a patrolman's eyes lingered too long on James, whose skin bore my shade more clearly than Catherine's. My heart thudded until Rebecca's contact slipped him a coin and a lie. We moved on, but the lesson burned. One wrong glance could end us all. At last, in winter's bite, we reached the edge of the Niagara River. Snow fell soft around us, muffling sound, making the world quiet as prayer. Ahead stretched a simple bridge of wood and iron. On the far side, Canada, freedom. Catherine held Thomas by the hand, Mary in her arms, James clinging to my coat. The children shivered, their breaths white in the night air. Catherine's eyes brimmed as she whispered, "Samuel, is this it?" I nodded, my throat too tight for words. We stepped forward together, our feet crunching on the frozen boards. Every step was a lifetime. Every step carried us further from chains and closer to something I had scarcely dared dream. When at last our boots touched the far bank, I stopped, turned, and looked back at the river cutting Virginia from my soul. The wind stung my face and my chest burned as I whispered, "We are free." Catherine pressed her lips to my shoulder, tears warm against the cold. "Free," she echoed, as if tasting the word for the first time. The children laughed then, chasing snowflakes, their joy ringing into the Canadian night. And in their laughter, I heard the sound of chains breaking forever. Across the Niagara, the garden's secret children were no longer shadows. In Canada, they stepped into the light of freedom. If freedom was one bridge away, but crossing meant losing everything behind you, would you take that step? Freedom, I learned, does not come with trumpets or banners. It comes with the sound of hammers on wood, the hum of a needle through cloth, the laughter of children who no longer have to whisper in shadows. In Canada, we were reborn. Catherine shed the name Whitmore like a skin and became Sarah Johnson, a widow to the world, but my wife in truth. I became Samuel Johnson, no longer a slave in another man's house, but a carpenter with calloused hands and my own wages. We rented a small wooden house near Toronto, nothing like the marble halls of Rosehaven, but it was ours. Each board, each nail, each fire in the hearth was earned, not stolen from another man's life. For the first time, when I sat at a table with Catherine and the children, I was not a servant lurking at the edges. I was father. I was husband. I was free. Thomas, Mary, and James began school that spring. To see them among other children, laughing, learning letters without fear, was a sight I will carry to my grave. No whispers about their blood, no cruel stares marking them as shadows. They were children, simply children. Catherine worked as a seamstress, her once sheltered hands learning the ache of needles and cloth. At first it humbled her, but soon she found pride in her work. Better this, she told me one night, than silk gowns in a prison of gold. In the spring of 1852, we stood before a small congregation, our children at our side, and we married in the open. No secrets, no masks. I slipped a simple band onto her finger, as the minister declared her my wife before God and witnesses. When she whispered, "Yes, I will," I felt chains I hadn't known still clung to me fall away. That night, when the children cheered and we shared bread and laughter with neighbors, Catherine leaned close and said, "Do you realize, Samuel, this is the first time I have ever been allowed to choose?" I kissed her hand and whispered, "Then let this life be built on nothing but our choices." Years passed. My carpentry grew into a workshop. Catherine's needle became a business. We were never rich, but we were never owned. The children thrived. Thomas dreaming of medicine, Mary sketching with surprising talent, James absorbing languages like water. And then in 1857, our fourth child was born, a daughter we named Hope. She came into this world free, her first cry echoing not in fear but in joy. Catherine held her, tears streaming down her face. "This one," she whispered, "will never know change, Samuel. Not in body, not in name." And I swore then and there that no matter what hardship lay ahead, I would keep that promise. From slave and heiress to Samuel and Sarah Johnson, in Canada, love became lawful, children became free, and hope was born. Would you trade wealth and power for a small house if it meant you could finally love in the open? The years after our flight unfolded quietly, yet each day was a miracle. We were no longer fugitives hiding in cellars. We were a family with roots. Our little house filled with the smells of bread and sawdust, the sound of Mary's pencil scratching paper, James reciting French phrases, Thomas dreaming aloud of healing others, and baby Hope, born free, grew into the living proof that love could outlive chains. Still, Rosehaven lingered like a ghost. Some nights Catherine dreamed of its marble columns and woke with tears. "I left my father, Samuel," she whispered once. "I left his world to collapse without me." But collapse it did. In 1858, a letter found us carried north by the same network that had once carried us through the night. It bore the seal of a lawyer in Philadelphia, and inside lay a truth that stunned us both. Colonel Whitmore was dead, and his will had left provisions for Catherine. "If my daughter should be found alive," it read, "let $50,000 be held in trust, that she may live with dignity beyond Virginia's reach." I stared at the page, unable to believe. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew we would survive." Catherine's hands shook as she clutched the letter. It's his way of saying he forgave me, or perhaps that he loved me enough to let me go. We traveled south to claim it, careful as foxes, cloaked in our new names. The money came, and with it choices we never dreamed of. Catherine built a school for the children of freedmen, where young hands turned pages instead of picking cotton. I expanded my carpentry into a workshop where men learned trades to feed their families. Together we gave others what Rosehaven never gave us, a chance to live with dignity. Our children grew into leaders, Thomas became a doctor, treating both black and white in the same breath. Mary's paintings captured the resilience of those who had crossed rivers and borders, their colors singing louder than sermons. James became a scholar, his books preserving the voices of those who would otherwise be lost. And little Hope, born into freedom, became a teacher, her very name echoing the promise we had risked everything to keep. Sometimes Catherine and I walked in the garden behind our Canadian home. Not marble fountains and manicured roses, but wildflowers bending in the wind. She would slip her hand into mine and whisper, "Do you remember the roses, Samuel? The thorns, the secrets?" "I remember," I'd reply. "But I'd rather have these wild blooms free and untamed." Because in the end, Rosehaven's garden bore two kinds of fruit: the bloodline that destroyed a dynasty, and the legacy that built a future. Our love was forbidden, yes. It was whispered about as sin, a crime, an abomination. But when the laws of men crumble, love remains. And from our love came children, and from our children came freedom. The heiress and her slave lover did not just survive. They built a new world. Rosehaven fell, but their legacy rose in its place. Do you think history remembers the scandal, or the sacrifice that gave birth to freedom?